"Get off my lake right now or I am calling the police." That was the first thing I heard. Not the chirping of the morning cardinals, not the gentle lap of water against the pilings, but a voice that sounded like a band saw cutting through sheet metal. I turned around, coffee mug halfway to my mouth, to see a woman standing on the edge of my property line. She was vibrating with rage, her bobbed hair cut perfectly motionless despite her shaking, pointing a finger at me like she was casting a hex. "I'm sorry," I asked, genuinely confused. I was standing on my own dock attached to my own cabin, holding my own fishing rod. "You heard me," she screamed, marching down the gravel slope in heels that had no business being in the woods. "I am Cynthia Vance, president of the Blackwood Shores HOA, and you are violating the exclusive community use policy. Leave immediately." I looked at her, then I looked at the lake, glassy, silent, with mist rising off it like steam from a hot bath. And then I looked back at her. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice low, the way I used to in courtrooms when I wanted a witness to hang themselves. "I own this cabin. I closed on it 3 months ago. I'm pretty sure fishing off my own deck is part of the package." "Not anymore," she shrieked, whipping out her phone to record me. "I control the access rights. This is a private amenity. I'm dialing 911. And she did right there. She dialed 911 because a 45-year-old man was drinking hazelnut coffee and fishing for bass on a Tuesday morning. I watched her pacing back and forth, narrating to the dispatcher about a hostile intruder and imminent threat to property values. And I felt this strange, cold calm wash over me. You see, Cynthia didn't know who I was. She saw a guy in a flannel shirt and worn-out jeans and assumed I was some pushover she could bully. She didn't know that I had spent the last 20 years as a corporate litigator in Chicago, tearing apart mergers and acquisitions for breakfast. She didn't know that I had moved to this cabin specifically because I was tired of fighting, tired of the noise, tired of people exactly like her. But as I watched her screaming into her iPhone, I realized something. I might have retired from the law, but the law hadn't retired for me. And Cynthia Vance had just picked a fight with the wrong guy on the wrong day on the wrong piece of dirt. What I didn't know then, standing there with my fishing rod, was that this wasn't just a property dispute. It was the first domino in a chain reaction that would end with me owning not just my cabin, but the entire county's history, and Cynthia trading her designer blazer for a prison jumpsuit. Let me back up a bit. My name is Elias Thorne. 6 months before the incident, I was sitting in a corner office overlooking the Chicago skyline, feeling like my heart was going to explode. The doctors called it extreme burnout. I called it a wake-up call. I sold the condo, cashed out the partnership equity, and went looking for the quietest place on earth. I found it in Blackwood Shores, or so I thought. It was a dusty, forgotten estate sale. A cabin that had been in the same family since the 1800s. Sold as is with everything inside. That Tuesday morning was supposed to be the start of my new life. Just me, the water, and silence. When the police cruiser finally crunched down my gravel driveway, kicking up dust, I almost felt sorry for the deputy. He looked young, maybe 25, and he had that exhausted look of a man who deals with petty neighborhood squabbles way too often. Cynthia practically threw herself at the patrol car before he could even put it in park. "Officer, thank God. Arrest him. He's trespassing. He's destroying the ecosystem." The deputy, "Officer Miller." I caught his name tag, stepped out, adjusted his belt, and looked past her to where I was leaning against the railing of my deck. "Ma'am," he said, "is that the gentleman?" "Yes. Look at him. He refuses to leave." Miller walked over to me, ignoring Cynthia's frantic hand gestures. "Morning, sir. You live here?" "Morning, officer," I said, setting my coffee down. "I do. Bought the place in February. Here's the deed. Fishing license is in my back pocket." I handed him the paperwork I'd preemptively grabbed from the kitchen counter because, again, former lawyer, I document everything. Miller looked at the deed. He looked at my license. He looked at the cabin behind me full of my furniture. Then he turned to Cynthia. Ma'am, this is his house. He's fishing on his property. This is a civil matter at best, but honestly, it's not even that. It's just a man fishing. Cynthia's face went a color I've only seen on boiled lobsters. You don't understand. The HOA voted. We have exclusive rights to the water column. I have the paperwork. She shoved a binder at him. Miller didn't even open it. Ma'am, unless you have a court order signed by a judge telling me to remove a homeowner from his own deck, I suggest you step off his property before he decides to press charges for trespassing against you. That silenced her for about 3 seconds. She glared at me, her eyes narrowing into slits. You think you've won, she hissed low enough so the deputy couldn't hear. But you have no idea who you're dealing with. I built this community. I own this lake. You'll be gone in a month. She spun on her heel, marched back to her white G-Wagon, and peeled out, spraying gravel all over my freshly painted fence. Officer Miller sighed, tipping his hat. Sorry about that, Mr. Thorne. She calls us about twice a week. Usually it's about someone's grass being half an inch too high. Just ignore her. I planned to. I lied. Because I knew women like Cynthia. They don't stop. They escalate. And escalate she did. The next morning, I woke up to find my front door plastered with notices. Bright orange stickers, the kind they use on abandoned cars. Cease and desist. Notice of fine, $5,000. Non-compliance violation. She was hitting me with everything. Fines for unauthorized use of aquatic resources. Fines for non-conforming exterior paint. Fines for visual nuisance. I walked out to my mailbox and found a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of threatening a lien on my property if I didn't pay $50,000 in back dues and damages to community morale. But the kicker came that afternoon. I was out back chopping wood trying to work off the frustration when I saw them. 2 guys in tactical gear like full-on security uniforms, utility belts, the work standing on the edge of my property line. They weren't cops. They were private security. Can I help you? I called out, resting the axe on a stump. HOA patrol, one of them grunted. We're monitoring the shoreline to ensure no unauthorized access. You're standing on my land, I said. We're on the easement. The guy shot back, clearly reciting a line he'd been fed. HOA jurisdiction extends 50 feet from the high water mark. I went inside and called my lawyer buddy back in Chicago. Mark, I said, I need you to look into something for me. This HOA is acting like they own the air I breathe. While Mark was digging into the legal filings of the Blackwood Shores HOA, I decided to do some digging of my own. Literally, the cabin I bought had come as is, which meant the attic was still stuffed with the previous owner's junk. I hadn't touched it yet, figuring I'd get to it eventually. Well, eventually was now. I spent 3 days up there coughing in the dust, sorting through boxes of moth-eaten clothes and old National Geographics. I was about to give up when I undid. A heavy iron-bound trunk pushed all the way into the eaves, hidden under a pile of old quilts. I dragged it out, the metal screeching against the floorboards. Inside, it wasn't family photos or antique jewelry. It was paper. Reams of it, yellowed, brittle, smelling of cedar and history. There were journals from the 1890s, ledgers, maps drawn by hand in ink that had turned brown with age, and at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, was a document that looked official. It had a wax seal on it. I unfolded it carefully on the attic floor. It was a land patent, not a standard deed, but a federal land patent granted in 1872 to a man named Silas Blackwood, the original owner of the cabin. I started reading, squinting in the dim light. The language was archaic, full of heretofores and witnesses, but my legal brain started translation mode instantly. It detailed a grant of timber and water rights for a parcel of land. But as I read the coordinates, sections, townships, ranges, my heart started hammering against my ribs. I ran downstairs, grabbed my laptop, and pulled up the modern county GIS map. I started cross-referencing the coordinates from the 1872 document with the current map. Section 4, Section 5. the entire northern basin. I sat back staring at the screen. If this document was valid, and federal land patents are notoriously hard to overturn, then Silas Blackwood didn't just own the 4 acres my cabin sat on. He owned the land under the lake. He owned the land across the lake. He owned the forest behind the subdivision. He owned everything. And according to the chain of title I'd seen when I bought the place, the estate had passed unbroken from Silas Blackwood down to the heir I bought it from. It had never been subdivided. It had never been sold off in parcels. The subdivision of Blackwood Shores was built on top of land that legally might not have ever been sold to a developer. I needed verification. I needed an expert. I hired Dr. Eris, a historian and genealogist from the State University. She drove out 2 days later. A tiny woman with thick glasses and an intensity that scared me a little. She spent 6 hours with the documents, mumbling to herself, measuring, checking seals with a magnifying glass. While she worked, the harassment outside ramped up. Cynthia wasn't just sending fines anymore. She was holding court. My neighbor Benny came over that evening. Benny was a good guy, a retired mechanic who looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He looked terrified. He stood on my porch, wringing his baseball cap in his grease-stained hands. "Elias," he whispered, looking over his shoulder. I got to tell you something. Come in, Benny, sit down. You look like you've seen a ghost." He sat at my kitchen table, refusing coffee. "It's Cynthia. She held a meeting last night, a secret one. Only the inner circle board members. And she paid me," Benny said, his voice cracking. "She gave me $5,000 cash from the reserve fund. She told me I had to sign a statement saying I saw you threatening kids at the lake. Said I had to say you were a danger to the community." I felt the anger flare up hot and sharp, but I looked at Benny's face. He was crying. "My wife Martha, her meds went up again. The insurance denied the claim. I needed the money. Elias, I took it, but I haven't signed the paper yet. I can't do it. You're a good neighbor." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Keep the money, Benny. Use it for Martha, but give me the statement she wants you to sign." He handed me a crumpled piece of paper. It was a fabrication, a complete lie drafted by Cynthia, painting me as a violent, unhinged lunatic. "Why is she doing this, Benny? It's just fishing. Why does she care so much?" Benny looked at me, eyes wide. "You don't know? It's not a bow. The fishing. It's the deal. She's selling the lake access rights." "What?" "She's got a developer from the city, Preston Ventures. They want to turn the North Shore, your shore, into a private luxury resort. Glamping pods, a clubhouse, motorized boat rentals. Cynthia stands to make a massive consulting fee if she can guarantee exclusive commercial access. You're the only thing standing in her way because your property sits right on the access road." It all clicked. The aggression, the 911 call, the desperation to get me out. She wasn't protecting the community. She was selling it out. She was trying to evict me so she could pave paradise and put up a parking lot and pocket $1 million in the process. Just then, Dr. Aries walked out of the living room holding the land patent like it was a holy relic. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you need to sit down."